Hello and welcome to Techno Talk series by the Economic Times in partnership with Lenovo. I am Gauri Dwivedi and I will be in conversation with two stalwarts from the industry to talk about an issue that is now becoming mainstream as far as corporate India is concerned, which is how to identify the faster and agile path to sustainability. And that's really our topic today. That is faster and agile paths to sustainability through technology. Increasingly, it is being recognized that digital strategy and sustainability are now essentially intertwined. They are two sides of the same coin. Increasingly, more and more studies, latest being from the World Economic Forum, suggest that as many as 4 out of 10 CEOs believe that digital technologies are already having a very positive impact on their overall sustainability goals. And digital technologies are being used to measure and track sustainability progress, the optimized use of resources by companies, and making possible a circular economy. Besides, of course, bringing in innovation and collaboration. So how do we go about doing that? How can Indian companies learn best practices from their global counterparts? What about some of the smaller companies that are yet to get onto the sustainability ladder? What have been some of the learnings for the Indian companies so far now that ESG compliance has become a major requirement by the regulator? Are some of the issues that I will be discussing today, besides getting as many questions as possible of the audience that are tuned in to discuss with me this very important and pertinent topic. I now welcome my two guests this afternoon, Mr. Naveen GV, who is the Corporate Officer and Managing Director of Benchmark Gen Suite, and Mr. Sunil Kaul, who is the Managing Director of Evolve, and Group President and CTO of Anand Group. He's a member of the Anand Executive Board as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Naveen, as well as Mr. Sunil, for speaking to Economic Times today.
Great. Thanks, Gauri. Pleasure is all ours.
Thanks a lot, Gauri. Good opportunity.
A quick, crisp bio for the benefit of our audience. Mr. Naveen is an environmental health and safety and management professional with over 23 years of experience that spans across government, consulting, and industry sectors. Benchmark ESG offers software solutions to global customers to manage their ESG program. Mr. Kaul is a veteran in the industry. He spent over 37 years with the Anand Group. He's held key managerial positions in Japan, Germany as plant head, and as the Group President of Technology, Innovation and Automation. He is steering the technological innovation that the group is now going through and looking at the changes in the future. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. And now welcome Mr. Kaul and then Mr. Naveen to make, I believe there are presentations that both of you would like to make to really set the context and the framework for this entire conversation, to highlight some of the key areas that you would want to focus on. ESG is now a blue ocean, and highlighting the first 2-3 steps that are most important for companies really is one of the key areas that we need to focus on. Mr. Kaul, I want to first get you in on a presentation that you want to highlight, and then I get Mr. Naveen as well. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Gauri. Thanks for giving me this opportunity for sharing our best practices. Before I start, I thought I'll give a little bit of introduction about our group. I work for Anand Group. We are system designers and component manufacturers for automotive vehicle manufacturers. We do supply to 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler guys, passenger vehicle guys, supply small commercial, big commercial vehicles. In our language, we are tier 1s to our OEMs. We are among one of the largest tier 1s in India. We employ around 19,000 people. And our revenue is around 16,000 crore. Between 16 companies, we have got around 60 plants located in NCR, Pune, Sanand, and Chennai. With such a large setup, I think we realize what our responsibilities are towards society. And we as a group are highly focused towards ESG. We deploy our best practices and also educate our people regularly. ESG at Anand is top-driven initiative. There is regular review by the promoters and supervisory board members. In fact, this year in February, our promoters launched a new platform, which is on the screen you can see, called Evolve. And if you look at its clean technologies for greener planet. So, well, we didn't use the word sustainability, but we put it across in a different way. And Evolve will be a platform. It will have all the companies under Evolve, which will provide solutions for sustainability, be it auto components, be it non-auto. So this is a platform for basically for providing sustainable solutions. Trying to move to the next slide somewhere. Just let me do it again. Yeah. If you look at on the left side, where we say hydrogen fuel cell, this is another new technology which you've been hearing about, the hydrogen economy and what's happening around the country. I think everybody all over the world is looking at hydrogen, because hydrogen probably would be the cleanest fuel in case we generate hydrogen from solar energy. Hydrogen has different colors. We call it green, blue, tortoise, red, etc., depending on the source of energy through which we generate. But green is, which is solar, and if we generate it with green energy, probably we are there towards going towards zero carbon emission. So we in Anand Group at Evolve, we're looking at that as a major technology, where we are working with the best players in UK in this product. In this slide, you look again on the left side, just so that I highlight you something about the energy storage system. Mainly energy storage stored in a battery. So battery is practically chemical. Well, does battery help sustainability? Well, question mark. Chemicals, lithium, cadmium, and all these things, nickel, they're not safe chemicals. So what we have done in this, we are storing energy in a mechanical form. If there are some mechanical engineers, they will love to listen to that. We store energy in kinetic energy form, in form of a flywheel which rotates at a RPM of 30,000 RPM, and that's through which it conserves the energy and gives it back whenever required. So again, a very new innovative product. We are among the first ones in the world to do it. And now if you look at another product where we talk about lightweight structure, carbon fiber. So we have come up with the manufacturing location where we can design and produce components with carbon fiber. Carbon fiber guarantees the weight reduction by 60%. So in a car or in a truck, you can look at a weight reduction for anything around 100 kgs to 500 kgs. If you produce a vehicle which is lighter by 20-25%, you imagine to that extent you will need less fuel or less energy to run it. And if you need less energy, well, you conserve the energy and also you emit less part of that. So that's where again, we are among the very few guys in India doing it. Having said about the products, what new companies we are coming up with, it's important for us to also look at our plants. We have 60 plants. And what we do in our plants, I think we need to be sustainable in that. And here you say technology is a pivot. All the puzzle gets solved through the technology, be it the transparency between the stakeholders, be it operations in manufacturing, we need to have a lot of technology to ensure that we are more efficient, and efficiency leads to sustainability. That's what I believe. We bring all people together on digital platform. And above all, if you look at the monitoring and measurements, well, that's all digital. We have energy management system where we monitor energy. We have monitoring system, digital monitoring system for measuring water usage. And we believe if you can measure, then you can obviously control it too. So technology, a very, very important part of the complete puzzle. Coming to the factories, coming to the plants, we talk about 3 scopes. I'm sure you people would be knowing about these 3 different scopes. So scope 1 is focusing on the company control resources, what you have within the country, within your own company, what you can control. Scope 2 broadly talks about emissions from the purchased electricity. For example, what type of electricity you're purchasing? Is it from renewable, or is it windmill sort of, or it's solar, or it could be from gas or diesel, oil fired. So that's scope 2. And scope 3 is emission at your suppliers. We have around 450 suppliers, and also recycling your products. So these are 3 different categories of scope. Scope 1, scope 2, that's a universal way how it is defined. And this is the target what we are working on. If you look at carbon neutrality, we are committed to carbon neutrality by 2025 as in the group. That means all 60 plants in our group would be carbon neutral by 2025. When I say carbon neutral, I mean 50% of our energy would be from renewable resources. Water neutrality is 2025, all plants would be water neutral. That means whatever water we augment, it would be minimum 50%. Another interesting topic, zero waste to landfill. The whole world talks about carbon neutrality. We don't hear so much about zero waste to landfill. This is something where as Indians, we need to broadly look at. We see all the plastics, the bottles, the polythene bags all over wherever we travel. And that is the worst part, I think, which really spoils the land and the environment. So we are committed that we would have zero waste to landfill from any of our company. Even today, we don't use plastic bottles. We measure in terms of plastic or polythene. We measure it in kilograms every week. And then we compare week on week. We make our Paratos. We see what is the most consuming plastics. How can we reduce that from suppliers and all that? So also the chemicals, what are emitted from the companies, how we make them zero discharge. So there's tremendous efforts being put by us towards water neutrality, zero waste, and obviously carbon neutrality, which is the talk of the town today. Well, it can be done. It's being done through reducing, avoiding, and offsetting. I would not go more in detail, not take much of your time on that. And some of the examples, what we have around 15 megawatt of solar within the organization. We have check dams at different places where we store the water and consume it. And then we have HRTA system. So that's where we try to have, we try to create more of, I would say we bring plants which don't need so much of water for, and then they inhale a lot of CO2 and they give a lot of oxygen. So this is offsetting our carbon, whatever we emit. This helps in offsetting that. So that was a small presentation from my side, Gauri. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kaul. Yes, sustainability, as you highlighted, are some areas where I think there is now greater corporate consciousness that is there. And you're right about the scope 1, 2, 3 that you mentioned. Scope 1 has now become mandatory for top 1,000 companies. How do we ensure that as it trickles down to the next layer of companies by size, how does technology aid them to be able to expedite their journey? Mr. Naveen, I now request you to present your presentation as well.
Great. Thanks, Gauri. I think wonderful to hear Mr. Call and the initiatives that they take at the Anand Group. The context again that I will talk to are a few things that I'd like to touch upon. One, obviously, resetting the context from what Gauri you started off with the value of the ESG. Obviously, there's a lot of headwinds and tailwinds with compliance and the various schemes that are in play today with the ESG. Looking at obviously the voluntary and the mandatory frameworks and how digitalization or digital transformation is the key to helping you kind of fine tune your ESG program and your disclosure reports. So from that perspective, a quick intro to Benchmark GenSuite. We offer a unified platform for sustainability, ESG, environment, health, safety, combined with product stewardship and operational supplier risk as well. So we've been in business for 25 plus years, operate across the world, and are one of the market leaders in offering the best of technology for businesses who want to work on some of these program areas that you see out here. So taking a step back from what Mr. Call mentioned about, we see a lot of traction with how ESG is linked to financial performance of companies. And I put out a few data points out here that talks clearly about businesses that value ESG. I think they've also grown financially well and are considered one of the market movers and leaders in the spaces that they operate in. I think that's corroborated through various facts from EcoVadis to Harvard to Infosys on the right-hand side, which the image they talk about interviews EHS, ESGXX, and they talk about the returns that they see with doing ESG well. And obviously, I think one basic parameter that obviously I hear a lot of buzzword with ESG right now, but I think as people get into the space of doing ESG, there's a lot of confusion of how to do it. And that's one of the things that I talk from a thought leadership perspective and simplify why ESG, obviously. And I think you can self-read through this. It offers growth opportunities, like Mr. Cole also mentioned, is like coming out with sustainable products. And I go back to my days in GE when we did Ecomagination in 2006, right? It was a mind game that played into people because GE produced products that would eventually look at, obviously, like aircraft engines, locomotives that emitted less, had a lot more efficiency and productivity and how they delivered. So it was a big hit for GE those days, and they were one of the front movers again in looking at sustainability from a product perspective way back earlier on. Obviously, there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that Mr. Call also talked about in how we can look at increasing our own efficiencies from our plants. And we see a lot of best practices being used where businesses are looking at those in terms of reducing energy, raw material, as well as other natural resources. The sense that also drives a lot of ESG and how it plays on employee productivity is obviously within our own teams at Benchmark GenSuite. The people that we work with on the team out here are proud to kind of associate their work towards an area like sustainability and ESG. And I'm sure that's applied to business as well. When businesses are doing good work in ESG and sustainability, employees have a greater level of satisfaction that helps with retention and as well as growth, right? And I talked about the investments being flown into this dimension. So in the landscape of obviously compliance and beyond, I think we've heard terminologies like UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've had reporting frameworks like GRI, SASB, SEBI's BRSR, which is applicable to India as well as Gauri mentioned for top 1,000 companies now. To also ESG rating and ranking being prominently viewed by the investment community as they're looking at investment decisions for businesses in India and across the world. And compliance, today being one of the front runners, I have a slide on compliance that talks about this is the momentum we're seeing world across. ESG is no more an option, but I think in most parts of the world, it is a must-do, and it's driven by regulatory authorities, whether it's the security exchanges across the world, or even for that matter, Department of Energy and Environment as well in several other nations. So with that context, obviously, what we also hear from the market, the investors, and our own subscribers that we serve today in the world is, while ESG is so very prominently needed, but as investors, when they look at businesses, I would say sustainability reports, they think about the fact that there's a lot of data missing, there are a lot of inconsistencies with data being reported. And that's one of the major drawbacks, which really hits the fact that the data is really not investment grade, right? And what does investment grade means? Obviously, data that is produced from a process where it's an output and not just a page where someone goes in and keys a data point, right? We're not looking at digitalization of a form to collect data, but we're looking at digital transformation where data becomes an outcome of following a process, following an approach or a strategy that the business sets up. So clearly, I think data has to be auditable, verifiable, timely, relevant, accurate, which is what the investment community needs. And from that perspective, digitization is the key, which is what I spoke of earlier, because it has an apples to apples across, like Mr. Call's example of 60 plants, right? You're standardizing how you capture that information, you're unifying all the data. And like Peter Drucker said, what you can measure is what you can really manage and grow towards, right? So it all happens through digital transformation, and a simple methodology, which is what I lay out here the last couple of minutes, is for businesses that really want to start and they don't know where to start. I think take a step back to look at what your baseline is, analyze your scenarios. Obviously, we're looking at not hitting or not going beyond the 1.5 degree temperature increase that we all are targeting. So from that perspective, look at what your transition risks and analyze those scenarios. Identify opportunities that can help you align with where you want to go. And from that perspective, set your targets. An advice that I've heard from a lot of speakers and a lot of well-read thought people is look at setting your targets only when you really know your baseline, right? Don't wake up and then show out into a boardroom without getting really prepped. Was one analogy that I've heard often from that perspective. And then go out and report and disclose, right? Where it's voluntary, you have the option to choose which framework you'd like to subscribe to. But in compliance, if you're in India and within the top 1,000 companies, you know BRSR is a mandate today. But that apart, I think you can pick what you'd like to really implement. And again, you don't have to start doing all. I think I've laid out a stepped process of how you can go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 on some of the things on the left-hand side that I've laid out as a matter of discussion for us.
Yes.
And lastly, this is a slide. This is a kind of an output that we'd really like to see, right? How are we doing business as usual today? Where is the target? And how are we progressing against that target with some of the decarbonization initiatives from an emissions perspective that the slide really shows up. So that's about what my 10 minute take was, Gauri. Would love to kind of have questions come through. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Naveen. Yes, those are some of the very important aspects of how technology can really help companies through the entire life cycle of the issue as far as ESG is concerned. And there is one question that has come, which is very specific in nature, but let me just quickly get it addressed, which is that water wastage discharge. How do companies ensure that they can get this treated going forward, and any recommendations to get some tech interventions? I mean, this is also an important area for specific sectors. Textiles is a big area where this is relevant. So that's a question I ask both of you, if you could respond to that.
Great.
Sorry, Naveen, please go. Please go.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Mr. Kaul.
Yeah, there are different, depending on the discharge, I think there are different technologies. Normally standard what we use is ETPs and STPs. And these are from the government regulations mandatory. And the water coming out after the process has to be used, has to be of the level where normally we tend to take it for our manufacturing processes, We use them in our toilets and other applications. So there are, I think today, a lot of technologies which can improve the discharge part of that. I think maybe Navinji could throw some more light.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Kaul. I think from obviously an experiences as an EHS consultant way back, the Pollution Control Board usually sets norms that an industry has to comply with for treating their water. And they also put in a point that you cannot send your effluent water outside of your premises, which means that we got to kind of treat it to the degree that it is reusable for the purposes that we deem fit within our own businesses, right? Whether it's for toilet flushing, whether it's for process, whether it's for non-touch water. I think the technologies, like Mr. Kaul said, and I also draw reference to Singapore, where municipal wastewater is treated and packaged as drinking water and sold in the marketplace, right? And this is not new. This is as old as, I think, 15, 18 years since I've seen this and heard this, and also have had people drink it. So technologies are available. So based on the characteristics of your own treated your standards, I think you can adopt them.
Okay, if one were to talk about some, okay, there's another question that's come, which is around AI, how AI can be implemented in solving sustainability issues. In fact, that's a question I wanted to ask. It was right up there in the talking points as well, which is around how artificial intelligence can really solve the puzzle, so to say. And as Mr. Kaul also said, technology is really the pivot. How do we get it to answer the question across sectors? Mr. Naveen, would you like to take that first?
Sure, absolutely. I think AI is here. I think AI is now predominantly used for assessing large volumes of data within the sustainability and environment, health, and safety front. I think with Benchmark GenSuite as well, we've deployed AI as an example to look at assessing data inputs and the quality of inputs that are coming in month on month. In the analogy that Mr. Kaul said, 60 plants. Sometimes people, when they key in data, they're prone to errors. And we have an AI engine running at the back to let them know that if a data point that they've entered, I think, crosses a threshold of 20% of the last entered value, it flashes up and it throws up some questions for them to reconsider and double check, and with some commentary in terms of why a specific data point has increased over 20%. As simple as that, to obviously looking at assessing the scenarios based on decarbonization initiatives that the businesses are taking. So an AI can in real time predict, considering various data points, how the business as usual will happen now, 5 years, 10 years down the line, based on the growth trajectories that they have, as well as on other physical risk and transition risks that are within the industry scope. So there's a lot of play, going to your point, with AI. Yes.
Mr. Kaul, would you like to add to it?
Yeah, see, we talk about AI, but I think what is the main requirement of AI when it gets active is the data. And that's where I think it took me around 1 year. I had the sustainability for the group. It took me 1 year to convince all the plants that we need to have digital measurement. If you don't have that, I think that's a very basic. If your data is not accurate, if your data is not in detail, it doesn't cover each and every segment, AI can't help. AI will come into picture after that. Well, we are a bit slow in changing ourselves, but I think there's no other option. There's no other choice than first getting into measuring it digitally. So all energy monitoring systems have to be digitized if you really want to move forward in this direction.
So we understand AI is this is really a top-driven approach, but is it important to also deploy skilled resources in-house? Because you've got to have some targets, then some measuring and monitoring ways to ensure that those ESG targets are being met. So how important it is to really find that balance, and what is that balance between having the top-down approach and also having some skilled resources in-house to meet your ESG needs?
Yeah, let me take this question first. What we did when we started this something 3 years back, this initiative. Initially, we thought the people who normally are connected to safety and other activities, so let's give them this job. And very soon we realized it's not to do with the safety. It's a different ballgame altogether. And you need to have people who understand this subject very well. We talked about, Navinji talked about GRE and all those things. You need to really read those documents to understand what the environment means, what ESG means. And every plant now has a person responsible at a managerial level who is qualified or well trained in this area. And he reports directly to the operations head of the plant, to the senior most plant in that operation, so that he has someone to help him in terms of providing resources. So just to answer your question, yes, every plant has a person knowledgeable, skillful. We relook at their training needs. We identify their gaps. We provide them the training. There are institutes in India. Even IIT has a special masters in ESG. So there are a lot of different institutes who provide these trainings. Even a training could be for 6 months, 9 months also. So there are a lot of such institutes, and this is very important. Without that, I don't think one can move forward. We wasted 1 year, to be very frank. And after 1 year, we learned that this is must.
No, I think I totally agree with Mr. Paul. I think I've seen that consistently with the businesses that we speak to as well. But there's one challenge, Gauri, that I have noted personally as well, is that while we have skilled engineers, I would say managers who understand environment, who understand sustainability, because they're either environment graduate or an environment health and safety graduate who understands the space, but there's lack of understanding and strategy at the top level. Right, because ESG is a hot topic right now. Businesses are still trying to figure out who really owns that particular function, if you will, right? Because that's a function that cuts across the entire enterprise. And in many cases, we have heard titles of chief investment officer, chief risk officer, kind of taking on those roles. But I think to Mr. Call's point, there's got to be competency in really understanding how this works and being competent to really look at steering the enterprise in the direction of ESG and sustainability, which is required in the top levels, is what I think.
Well, that's a fair point. And in fact, there's a very interesting question that's come, which is about that on one end, artificial intelligence can definitely help in analyzing data. But you only analyze what you collect. How about scientifically collecting the data that is available or can be made available for AI to then process it? So can we use technology to collect data in a more scientific manner as far as ESG is concerned? Mr. Kaul, would you like to take that?
No, let Mr. Navinji take it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'll go first because
sure.
So that's a common ask we get from businesses we speak to. Technology is available to directly tap into what Mr. Kaul alluded to as well, building management systems that collect the entire energy data for an enterprise for that matter, right? And we have systems like Benchmark Gen Suite that can tap into that, I would say, network to integrate that data point to come in automatically into the system, avoiding manual data entries, which is the first roadblock that a lot of us have is, okay, I still need people to go in and key data. That can be avoided with direct integrations with the building management systems or any other systems that have that data together for your enterprise. As simple as that. To obviously, I think we have technologies that can directly connect with the SCOMs, the energy companies, where that information is pulled directly from those bill of records for businesses that operate globally, and where there are APIs available to pull the data into a system. So for that matter, Gauri, yes, there are technologies available. Depending on the maturity of where a business stands, they can kind of deploy various options.
And so what about plastic and paper? Is that still being used significantly by companies? And how can that be minimized to ensure that corporates become more environmentally conscious? and also how sustainability gets mainstreamed for corporate practices?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, what practice we follow, I think no one is allowed to use a plastic water bottle. Now, a stainless steel bottle is part of joining kit. Anybody who joins gets a stainless steel bottle for water. So he or she has to use that bottle on. And as I said, also that every day, end of the day, the trash is separated. Anything polythene and plastic is kept separate, and then it is weighed. So we weigh it every day. We collect the data for a week on week. And then what we say Pareto, we look at what type of trash in terms of plastic, from where, what is the source of that? It could be, I think, from pantry, it could be from the processors. Looking at the Pareto, we say, which is the biggest element from where this plastic is coming? Then we try to look at, okay, can we get into degradable type of some material in place of this plastics? Can we use something which is recyclable? So then the team sits together and looks at a solution which will avoid using plastic. And then week on week, month on month, we keep measuring how can we reduce it. And that's where, as we said, Navinji also mentioned, unless you don't measure, you can't control it. Measure is the basic fundamental of any methodology to control it further. So that's what is very common in our company. All our plants do that. It is a pain to start with, but when you see the results, when you go around and you say, well, my plant, my area is the cleanest, I don't generate any such thing which goes to the landfill. Well, I feel, all my employees feel good about it, that we are the citizens, we're doing something good for the nation. And I'm sure they take this learning to their homes also. This learning doesn't stay only in the factory. When they go out of the factory, they also use that in their homes. So that's how we take it forward.
And I think I totally again agree with Mr. Kaul. But the aspect is large enterprises like Anand can afford to have a no plastic strategy, right? But I think the mass of India lies in its MSMEs. And thankfully, since ESG touches on suppliers as well, I think businesses like Anand can impose some restrictions on what their suppliers can, how can they pack and send the materials that Anand receives as a group, and have that be no plastic, right? So influencers like the Anand Group and the larger group, and with the EHS and ESG philosophy trickling down into the supply chain as well, we see a lot of momentum. Because if as an MSME, if I have to be competitive, if I have to be supplying to businesses like Anand or anyone for that matter, I know for a fact that I have to be in compliance to certain aspects that my customers want, which is one of the key things is no plastic. So there is an automatic transition because of how businesses like Anand are pushing it down, that MSMEs like us, in a sense, that all roll up under that specific umbrella.
Well, Gauri, if you let me speak a little bit beyond the plastics, very interesting thing is what do we do with the batteries and cells or the electronic waste? And especially when I see the batteries and cells thrown away you see on the streets, and that's another hazardous material. So what we are starting now, we are putting a box in every plant. We say, please come and bring those batteries from your home, bring your electronic waste from your home, please put it here. We will take care of the disposal.
Yeah.
So these are very small things, but well, that one brings the mindset change among the people, awareness, and also using some part of, I think, some practice which improves the sustainable effect.
Sure. Okay, so what about, I think transportation impact is a very major area of carbon footprint that companies have across the board. So is there a mechanism for tracking them, reporting, and also reducing the transportation impact that companies have?
Oh, definitely. We all measure it. Definitely. Transport is the biggest element. We all measure. And that is what provokes us. We measure in terms of how much carbon we emit, how much CO2 our vehicles emit, or vehicles which carry our material to our OEMs. We measure the distance, we measure as per the norms, what they are emitting. And that's the reason we are seeing that how do we improve? We're getting into electrical vehicles, or we're going to biofuels, looking at an option where we could reduce the emission. Definitely, that becomes very important part. And well, again, it's measured and improved. So when I say journey, when we say we will be carbon neutral by 2025, this is a very big element in that.
Naveen, would you like to add?
I think just adding the government of India's national logistic policy also will help in that regard. It's looking at streamlining and simplifying how materials move, and that's going to have a huge impact as well.
Okay, one question has come with regard to scope 4, which is how can that be prioritized or incentivized? I think that's too far away as far as our immediate ESG horizon is concerned. But since there's a specific question on scope 4, would any one of you like to take it?
There's nothing really known that we got to act. I think businesses are still kind of trying to get a hang around scope 3 in itself, right? The various categories there. We have 15 categories of how scope 3 is going to be measured. That in itself is a Herculean task for businesses to get their heads in and movement around that. Scope 4 is very, very aspirational at this point in time, is what I can tell you. And we've not heard that from businesses wanting to really look at a strategy and trying to tackle scope 4.
Yes, all corporate consciousness aside, I don't think businesses or corporates strive for more compliance on their end. So that is definitely there. But let me then ask you on one thing, which is that what are the specific technologies that companies can incorporate in a low-cost manner? Because I think that is really the key area, which could probably impede even as companies promote better business practices. Mr. Kaul, would you like to take that?
Yeah, first, I think the best learning we got from our ESG efforts is, well, in any project, what we consider for sustainability, payback is not more than 3 years. So we always carry a myth that, well, it's too much of money to be spent to look at sustainability. In fact, all the efforts, all the projects on sustainability give you better returns than any other project, to be very frank. So, well, technology is very clear. Solar, you look at solar, you get much cheaper electricity compared to what you get from the electricity board. And there are different models. There are OPEX model, CAPEX model. You can just have someone install it on your, on the roof, and then, well, he spends the money. That's it, and you just get some cheaper electricity. What could be better than that? So similarly, I think all ESG efforts, all sustainability efforts are cost rewarding. They're nowhere cost negative. Maybe Naveenji can talk a little more about that.
No, I think I totally agree. I totally agree. Even at personal levels, for example, I did a house in the Nilgiris and we went for a 10 kilowatt solar power plant, right? And it's a huge value because number one, I don't need supply from the grid and I don't need a generator lying on site, right? Which probably is going to be used once in a day, once in a year, or once in a couple of times a year. So avoided cost by doing solar, which gives me huge returns at an individual level. And I think like Mr. Kaul said, at business levels, I think solar is huge. I think people are going in for huge tracts of land that they want to do it and kind of move into that. So to answer your question, Gauri, there are technologies available based on what you really want to kind of tackle. What is material to you is the first thing that we analyze and assess when we start ESG. And based on what is material to a business, I think there are various technologies available today that Mr. Kaul points has a good ROI that businesses can kind of onboard quickly. And importantly, there's good financing mechanisms also available for green technologies, which is the other point, and at a lower rate of interest as well, right? So that really helps kind of provide that capital that is still required even if the ROI is 3 years to get industry moving.
Right. Specifically, there are areas, whether you talk about automation to reduce resource-intensive activities, or whether you talk about cloud to transform processes and enable probably remote work, or whether you talk about advanced analytics to capture real-time performance analysis. All these are efforts to optimize resources and at the same time reduce or build sustainability, so to say.
Right.
The question I want to ask is that while right now compliance is only for the top 1,000 companies, which are the sectors that you feel could really be the harbingers of growth specific to ESG compliance is concerned?
I think I can start and then Mr. Kaul can add.
Sure.
So while I think in India compliance is relevant for the top 1,000 companies, but I think I've always been speaking about the fact that while India's net zero target is 2070, and that requires beyond the 1,000 companies to come in play, right? And I think we've seen that with how SEBI has launched BRSR as well. While I think the first 1,000 companies are now required, but they also have versions called BRSR Lite, which starts to become applicable and relevant to businesses beyond the 1,000 companies, right? And obviously, I think they're capping it with reasonable assurance requirements that means that businesses have to really look at producing right and relevant data. So going on that side, I think it's going to take us another 3 to 5 years for perhaps the entire industry, the corporate industry, to start having a mandate to produce ESG KPIs from a compliance standpoint. I don't think it's too far.
It has to start somewhere.
Yes.
So we have to start somewhere. You have to pick up a small segment. Sorry, maybe I interrupted probably.
No, absolutely, sir. I think you're right. Please continue.
Mr. Kaul, there's a specific question that's come for you. Let me also add that, and you can address both of them, which is that how tough is it to green the value chain and learnings that Anand Group has in managing their emissions so far? Specific question for you.
Well, nothing is simple. Question is, we used to doing something for last 60 years in the same way, and now all of a sudden someone says, yeah, it has to change. It's very difficult unless you convince people why. If person is not convinced why we need it, I think no one looks at it. So a lot of efforts are put in making people understand the reason for change. And well, once people get committed, when they understand why, then obviously they look for a solution. They come up with the how part of it. And you look at the packing, recycling of packing, recyclable, degradable plastics, very commonly used, maybe a little expensive, but well, if you recycle it, it may make far bigger sense. You look at paper, how do you recycle the paper? You look at your components, what you design. How do you look at the recycling of that? That's very, very important. So that at least at the end of when the product has end the life, you just put it in a furnace if it's a metal. So you could recycle it. So some of the experiences are there from different companies have a different experience because they have to look at their own specific processes or specific product technologies, what they have to look at. But something like packing, those things are very common. None of our supplier can give us a material in paper carton, very clear, no carton at all. Okay. So we have defined in most of the companies limited type of size of packaging. We commonize, you say, okay, there are optimized, there are three size of packaging, or companies which generate or plants generate a sale of 1,000 crore, they also work with 3 to 4 size of packing. If you restrict your numbers of packing 3 to 4, then obviously your recycling of them becomes far more easier. It's okay. Not complex. Okay. These are the things, and then for scrap yards, wherever you generate the scrap, they are identified with the metal. Copper has separate, aluminum has separate scrap yard, steel has separate, paper has separate, and all that gets separated before we put into the scrap yard. Okay. So it gets
okay. So I want to take 2 quick questions as well that have come in. One, Naveen, would you just keep this? We'll try and take 2, 3 of these questions. So let's keep our answers a little brief if possible, which is that 100% compliance, how far away are we from that? Which are the industries that may find this very ambitious to achieve?
My take, again, from experiences, 100% compliance. I think within the top circles is probably, I would score them 8 on 10. But I think in the MSMEs is probably going to be 5 on 10 if you ask me honestly.
Okay. Next is innovative technologies that have revolutionized resource management. That's the key, isn't it, to be able to expedite the journey to sustainability? That's the second question. Technology for resource management.
I think once you measure what goes in, and you have the right tools to be able to look at it, analyze it, that itself is in a cause for better efficient management of resources, right? It goes back to my cleaner production days in the early 2000s, where it was a UNEP concept, which looked at raw materials from waste as well. So you're looking at the entire value chain, looking at where your material is getting wasted, and you're putting in practices to bring that back to life through the process. So again, to Mr. Kaul's point, if you measure it, I think you'll have better ways of how you can efficiently use it.
Mr. Kaul, you want to add to that?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay. Next is around describing the materiality prioritizations and how companies do that. Again, is there an interplay with technology that can provide superior answers?
I can start. Obviously, I think materiality is an assessment that you do on your desks, right? You get together, assess what the business aspects towards materiality are, and then you obviously rate, rank. They'll probably come. You'll probably have a list of 20 different points, but obviously you got to prioritize what you really want to work on, which is going to give you the best returns for the money that you spend. So I don't see so much of technology being a play there, other than being able to have a repository of all those ideas and then have a game plan of who owns them, right? That's a process that technology can help with material assessment.
Mr. Kaul, feel free to comment if you would like to.
I think there's nothing standard in it. I think it depends from industry to industry. I think, as Naveenji mentioned, metro prioritizing and prioritization will change from company to company, industry to industry. So there's nothing standard formula for that.
What about policy framework? I think that's another very important area. Just like the entire issue of compliance is developing, so is policy mandates also. Is it keeping pace? And how is it that the government can have an enabling factor, so to say, in pushing sustainable practices?
Again, what I see, this is an area where we're seeing a lot of policy intervention take place very soon, right? Every other day, not just India, but every other day you wake up, you see something else happening, some other movements, which is where I think industry is a bit confused in terms of, we call that the alphabet soup with respect to frameworks, right? So we have GRI, we have CDP, we have TNFD, we have TCFD. So every other day we kind of see newer things come across, right? And government also is bent upon looking at how best that they can look at obviously improving upon what the BRSR standards are. And we've seen huge traction. I think SEBI is doing great with respect to, I would say, information, with respect to dissemination, as well as implementation of the BRSR framework.
Right. Mr. Kaul?
Yeah, I would say, well, government has a role to play, but I don't think government alone can do anything. I think unless the society, we people are not spreading the awareness, I think it's not going to move. Like you mentioned about 1,000 companies. Well, government started with 1,000 companies, but in our group, we have only one listed company. That's Gabriel. So another 16 companies are not listed. But 16 companies are equally working on ESG like Gabriel is. So it's not that only those 1,000 companies should be following. It's a roadmap for other companies to get onto it immediately. So I think the awareness is very important. I think we leaders have to take it to people, to take it to their homes, to take the society, to take it to the society. So
So that's correct. This is still an area which is still developing and evolving. There are more questions, but I have the luxury and the privilege of being the moderator and deciding which to take and which to skip. So, and also, for squeezing in my own question, which is one that while I was reading and wanting to know more on this, the one thing that came up again and again was about how technology and technology companies are also making a pitch for right to repair, and their hardware and their entire chain also becoming easy to use, and also e-waste going down. Is that again a very important area that companies are also now asking technology vendors and their tech providers to work on, which is to reduce their e-waste?
I think absolutely. I see that happening. I think let's take an example of Apple. So if you buy an iPhone now, it no longer comes with a charger. It no longer comes with headphones today, right? Because obviously, I think Apple knows that industry are using various other, I would say, devices for that, and they're kind of coming down on how much of material is going into what they make. So I do see a conscious effort that industry is playing in that aspect.
Mr. Paul?
Let me add to that. If you look at what the government has been doing along with our industries, scrappage of cars. I think big OEMs now are getting into this. The purpose is not to scrap the cars. They take the car for a scrap, and they would like to take out 25 to 30% of the components which can be reused. To that extent, then you reduce the waste at least 25%, and then they also bring the waste which could be recycled. So I think government has played a big role in this. I think we as industry for last 1 year, I think we worked together with the government to bring out the regulations and the rules and make the procedures. So yeah, this is a big thing.
I think design for recycle, design for reuse is probably been one of the hallmarks of how Indian businesses have always operated, right? So even if you look back, the waste that goes into our landfills, it's a problem because it is mixed for now. But I think, like Mr. Kaul said, if you have good scrap yards, they can kind of turn wealth out of waste, and we've seen that. So I think industry is in the right place.
Yes, indeed it is. And with that, we come to an end of another very exciting and a very insightful session. And in fact, also the end of the Techno Talk series by Economic Times in partnership with Lenovo. I want to thank both Mr. Kaul as well as Mr. Naveen for taking out the time, quickly taking those questions that were just coming in from the audience also. And thank you so much to both of you. And I think what you mentioned is very important and essentially the crux of the entire issue today, which is that sustainable technology is also an important aspect as far as finding digital solutions that can enable ESG outcomes for enterprises as well as for their customers. And thinking only about the sustainability of IT itself is just one imperative. And finding a holistic solution to this, which is long-term, is equally important. And technology really finding and providing the answers is what the hope really is. And on that note, I end this session. Thank you so much for watching to all our viewers. And thank you so much to Mr. Kaul and Mr. Naveen once again.
Thanks a lot.